Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. It's Donna Cravata, and we are back here again for our 12th wisdom panel. And I absolutely love hosting these. One of my favorite things about hosting these is I get to bring together these incredible women that are doing incredible work in the world, and many of them don't know each other. So it's so much fun to bring them together and have these conversations. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then we are going to just jump into this conversation. So, first, we have Pam Slim. She's an author, speaker, podcast host, a business coach, and she helps bring world changing ideas to life. Dana Hilmer is a women's leadership and midlife reinvention coach, co creator of Camp Reinvention, and a catalyst for transformation. Jack Perez is a pro aging champion, the founder of the thought leadership platform, The Cool Life, where they normalize aging for women via meaningful, curated content and women driven brands. Kim Fuller is a photographer, story coach, author, TEDx speaker, and the founder of Born to Rise, a creative and inspirational movement connecting our stories and collective desire to raise consciousness. Summer Watson is a high performance coach, doctor of psychology, podcast and live show host, author, mentor, founder of Core Women, a community of empowerment and engagement that brings people together to promote authentic change. And Virginie Glazer is a chief marketing officer, visionary digital strategist, storyteller, and she also has co-created this community-led organization called Acorn Oak, and it's an exclusive network of fractional executive women who dare to lead differently. And um, every single woman here is passionate about community and the impact and change that we could make in the world when we do things together. And this is going to be a hell of a conversation. So I'm just going to start with, what changed for you when you turned 50, and did the meaning of community deepen in any way? Pam, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, it's so funny. When I turned 50 is when I opened a community lab. So I never made that correlation before now, but I definitely knew that for me it was going back to a core joy where I did lots and lots of in-person community building for many years in San Francisco, in the Bay Area where I'm from. And then I just spent a lot of years online. And I really did get to a place where our kids were getting older. I particularly saw that there was not visibility for Indigenous entrepreneurs. My kids are Navajo and white, and their dad's Navajo. And so we decided to open up an in-person lab, and it just completely reactivated and re-energized my life and my body of work.
It's fantastic. I love that so much. I love how you get inspired by something that happens in your life. This is what I love about stories and being in community in that way. Is you get to hear from people and what inspired them to do what they're doing. So I love that, Pam. But for me, I think when I hit 50, I could see my kids starting to take off, and leaving the nest and all of that. And I really love a house full of energy and people and all of that. So I think what changed for me is that desire to be around a lot of people who were doing maybe like-minded things. And I started finding like women in business coaching programs and networking and all of that. And then just really thrived from there. I love when women get together. So even seeing all of your faces on this panel is more fun than a one-on-one, because I think we feed off of each other, and I think women are great at supporting and being in community. So I think for me, just being more engaged in community happened after 50.
So I'm going to be honest, ladies. It was a completely selfish play on my part, because when I started going through that transition, the loneliness really kicked in, the isolation started to kick in, and also that invisibility cloak. I didn't see myself anywhere. I didn't see myself in the community that is the world, right? And in the ads of the clothing that I buy or anything, I felt so isolated. And I believed that I could not be the only human, the only woman who was feeling that way. That is why I built the platform that I built because I wanted to bring women from around the world that are already solving these riddles together to share that information, because I think information is power. And that's why I built the platform. I built the community because I didn't want to be invisible. Come on, well, we have what, another 30, 40 years left? And every woman in this room that I can look at, none of you are invisible, loves. You are incredibly beautiful, powerhouse women with huge glows. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Awesome.
You know, it's interesting. For me, I felt like there was a convergence of my kids kind of getting to the point where they were launching, right? I've got 3 boys. They were launching and going to college. COVID, menopause, like all of it kind of came together at one time. And, you know, you start questioning, like, who am I and what do I want? And I've always been a person that has been very involved in the community, but I realized a lot of it was through the lens of my kids, right? Like a lot of the people I was spending time with were the people that were lovely, but they were on the sports field or they were at the, you know, whatever event that was through my kids. And I realized I was having less and less time with the people I consider to be my friends, the friendships that I created, right? And so, of course, COVID posed challenges with that, seeing the people that you want to see, right? So for me, 2 things happened. One was Wendy and I started Camp Reinvention as a retreat originally in January of 2020, and it went really, really well. And we're like, let's do it again. And then COVID happened, right? So we decided to bring Camp Reinvention online, and that created a community of women that were at that same stage of life and really wanting to be vibrant and relevant. And, you know, so I think a huge benefit of Camp Reinvention, even though it's a coaching program, became community.
Yeah.
We also did a program called Positive Mornings, and it was through a group called Covey Club, which is all about community. And for Positive Mornings, we started it as a thing that we thought was going to be 2 weeks, maybe. It was the beginning of the pandemic, right? So we met every morning for an hour. We had a different conversation and brought women together around the globe. It was incredible. And we thought it was just going to be this short-term thing. And of course, COVID lasted forever. So then we did it every Monday morning for a year, and we did it free, you know, this whole time as a service just to bring women together. And then we continued it for another 6 months. And I think, again, what came out of that was, in a really tough time, was bringing people together to have really honest conversations. And I think that's what's missing in people's lives. Is let's talk about our fears. Let's talk about the stuff that's holding us back. Let's talk about, you know, whatever is popping up in our life that is really grounded in reality. And I think when we do that, we realize we're not alone.
Yeah.
I can relate to what you just said, Dina. I think for me, the 50s was, I felt a great sense of freedom. And the reason is, for the first time, I was able to put myself first. I have also 3 daughters in their mid-20s. And that was really empowering. But because of that, I felt lonely, especially in my fractional practice. So I decided to create a community of other fractional executive women. And I think what really stood out for me was that there's something unique about feminine leadership and being surrounded, because very often, people would ask me, why didn't you want other, fractional executive to be around you to share frameworks and best practices? But I think there's something very unique about feminine leadership. There's a curiosity and an authenticity that I really appreciated, that I still enjoy very much. And I wouldn't be who I am if it was not for all my female counterparts with whom I meet on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I want to jump in here for a sec because, based on many things that you've all just expressed, I want to touch on a few things. So Donna asked a great question. What was it that impacted us or changed for us when we turned 50? And I would have to say that I didn't feel that big impact. I think I felt it earlier on. I had a hysterectomy at 34. I didn't have any children. And so my milestones were always based around how I was growing up, my goals, my priorities, these kinds of things. But it wasn't
Don't rub it in, Summer. Don't rub it in. Some of us weren't that smart.
Here's the thing. It was hard at 34 because I did feel alone. I felt very alone.
I bet. I bet. I'm just trying to lighten the.
Oh no, there's levity and everything, right? So it's like I did feel alone. I felt like I hit a brick wall. There were many things that I was going through at the same time. I was finishing my doctorate. We were getting ready to ship off to Japan. My husband was transitioning from enlisted to officer. I mean, he was in Texas training. I was in San Diego. There were a ton of things going on, and I had to finish my doctorate before we left. And yet, you know, I still wanted children. And when I came out of that operating room, it was, oh, by the way, we had to do a full hysterectomy. So there was no way to harvest my eggs any longer. There was no way to. So I was just like, poo, 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 poo. Oh my gosh, right? So I was dealing with a lot of this earlier on. So when it came to that transition of 50, I didn't feel it so wildly, right? What I did feel at 49 was, well, there's something different I want to give to the world. There's something else that I want to contribute. And that's really when I started my own business. But it was really, there was a milestone before that in 2014 when my husband got out of the Marine Corps, because it was kind of like a sense of freedom at that point, because I wasn't moving every 3 years. I wasn't transitioning because of his profession. My trajectory when I got out of college, I went to Berkeley. I was loving it. I was very involved there. And I thought, I want my trajectory is, of course, because of the conditioning, right? I want to work for a company. I want that corner office with the window. I want, you saw Working Girl, right, ladies? Not baby.
I was miserable. Multiple times, is my guess, Summer. Probably multiple times.
Multiple times, right? And so wanted that, but that was not to be my trajectory when you marry somebody in the military. It was, you move frequently. And so what that means is you're looking for a job frequently.
Yeah.
You don't have that tenure. So anyway, based on what all of you said, that transition came really early for me to really do some hardcore self-reflection about how do you want to give back? What's your purpose? What are your drivers? What's meaningful and authentic to you? And so when I did reach 49 and 50, it was build your business and bring everything forward, such as that authenticity, that laughter, that honesty, and bring this connection to others. Let's build together. So
yeah, I grew up. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to just remark that, Summer, I'm hearing that you moved a lot. I've lived in 8 states. I think, Virginia, you said that you've lived in quite a few places. I think when you move a lot, it kind of forces you to create community, right? Right. And so I think that intentionality has been kind of instilled in me from a young age, because I just moved like every 5 years, so I guess there's a benefit to that. Right.
Yeah. I think the same for me. I grew up as a Navy kid instead of marrying a Navy officer. And I think those early years, I learned a lot about resiliency and, not being connected to a lot of things, because you kind of get rid of everything you own every time we moved, or at least we did. And I even lived on a sailboat for a time where I had very little objects. So I learned a lot of great lessons, but I also lacked intimacy with community. So I never kind of had that experience where you grow up with somebody from start to finish. And so now that I've lived in my home, for 35 years in Rhode Island, it's been really interesting, because just yesterday, our neighbor across the street, who I saw as a baby, just had a baby. And that means a lot to me. And I think, so community for me has a vibe of intimacy to it. Even though we're with a lot of people, I feel like the communities that I tend to crave are ones that have a similar desire or passion about something or ideas, because I feel like there's a connection that's really deeper for me. And I really appreciate that when there are those real conversations about whatever topics we might be, talking about. So relating to that, moving around, Summer, it's really, I watched my mom do it and struggle as an artist to find herself and find her community as well. But yeah, so intimacy is a big part of community for me as well. That kind of deeper conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of intimacy, that whole it's not just an idea, but it's a practice to get used to asking those questions and having that laughter, just sharing those things that we find courageous, right? And so one of the things I wanted to add here too is I come from a very unique background. So Pamela had mentioned her children have a very unique background as well, and so do I. My mom is Armenian and European, and my dad is Filipino and Mexican. And so growing up, it was difficult to find out or figure out, where do I belong? Because people kind of want to like put themselves into these pockets and groups. And so when I went to Cal, I started doing and taking all these culture classes and started learning more about different people, their different backgrounds, because I was interested. And I was like, where do you belong? And I realized I belong in the world, and I belong as a person that wants to learn more about others. And I remember taking a cruise during college with my grandmother. She's like, honey, I'm going to take you on a cruise. And we had to fill out these forms. And it said, break down who you are. And I said, Graham, I'm more than one of these boxes. And she said, darling, you're American. And I was like, okay, that's what I am. And I'm just going to put that. So,
you're more than one of those boxes. You're American.
I'm American. I loved it.
And I totally can relate to you ladies. I grew up as a first generation born American. My parents were refugees from Cuba. And so I grew up where when they came over, they literally came with the clothes on their back, a 6-year-old son, and a dog. Don't ask me how they got the dog out, but they got the dog out. But I was raised in an environment where the inside of the house was basically Little Havana, and the outside of the house was the United States of America. And talk about not understanding where you belong. I mean, all of my friends were shaving their legs and wearing makeup and going out on dates. And guess who wasn't doing that?
Yeah.
So, but honestly, I believe that helped build resilience, determination, and the ability to figure out how to fit in to communities where maybe it wasn't so obvious for me, like it wasn't a given, right? I mean, where does the Cuban refugee, that little girl who learned how to speak English in kindergarten and had to take summer school her first year because English wasn't her first language.
Yeah.
But look at me now.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Last to go back to what Kim said. Sorry.
Go ahead, Virginia.
I'd love to go back to what Kim said about this feeling of intimacy in the community, which comes from trust, trusting others, and the sense of belonging. And I'm curious to see, I would love to learn about everyone around shared value and purpose, because I do believe that in order for us to gain that trust and that intimacy in our communities, communities thrive when members have common goals and values. So a great, a wonderful community is one that will have shared values and purpose. So how do you instill that? How do you create a community with members who share the same values and purpose? Is it in the, when you meet someone new is that in the story you tell at first? Is it a repeating story? I'd love to have a conversation around these two elements of communities.
Yeah. I think for me, my passion in starting Born to Rise was probably craving that intimacy, but doing it through story, because I felt like when someone shares a personal story, just kind of like what we're doing now, describing who we are, there's a certain opening or vulnerability that allows us to be seen, and which I think is something we all desire on some level, is to be seen and acknowledged that we exist, or that what we're doing has some purpose internally. That always feels good. And I think that for me, when I got inspired to start the community, I felt that when I shared my own story, I got this kind of healing because no one was asking me questions. I did it on a TED stage. No one asked questions. They just listened, sat there, and then maybe came up to me at the end. But I wasn't interrupted as I shared. It was just, there was something really beautiful about just being seen and witnessed as I told my story. And I felt such power in that I thought, wow, this would be amazing to just offer to more people. And as that's happened, I've noticed how much women thrive when they hear someone else's story, see themselves in it, and also relate to it in some way, or maybe be inspired with a new perspective. And so for me, it's that's my driver, is to see that it helps us bridge divides. We feel less isolated or alone in our situations, and we really connect on a human level, and not all the us's and the thems and the boxes that we put people in and otherwise. So that's what's worked for me, and I absolutely love it.
We had just a real specific approach at the Learning Lab that really, I have strong points of view, no shock, as we all get to know each other. But one of them is, I love the conversation of, belonging and identity. And I'll speak, as a white woman and socialize that way, that very often I hear my own comrades, like talking about, why can't we all just sort of see through that, we're all the same and we all have a shared purpose. And a lot of what I've learned of being in community with people who are not white or come from all backgrounds or biracial, some are, right, like you're describing, is when we think about the process and the way that we get to know each other, we call it listen first at the lab, where there's this whole process as you're getting to know each other where you can really sit deeply and listen. Immediately I'm like tuned in to be excited for Jack's story about all the nuance, right, of, growing up with Cuban parents and summer, and like to really hear and witness and understand that deep sense, which is going to be different for different people, right? Each person that even might come from shared, DNA or ancestral background can have a very different experience given all these different things. And so as we think about it, I know for me, the lens was in person, like literally thinking about what is the experience walking down the street, in our case in Mesa, Arizona, where I might say, hey, as a marketing strategist, just go knock on people's doors and introduce yourself. When I'm talking to my friend Ita, who comes from Nigerian background, who's a tall 6'3" Black man, he's going to have a very different experience than if I'm going and introducing myself there. Or, my son and his best friend were stopped downtown in Mesa by the police. Like, where are you going? And they're like, to my mom's community lab, So there's this whole process of not skipping the step, but deeply listening to and hearing each individual's experience.
Yes.
And it takes, as all of you know, like a million different little conversations, to really get to know each other, where it's like, then you can over time begin to sink to that place where you're like, oh yes, we feel that human biological connection that we all have, right? Biologically, we're all human, we're all literally related. But it is what I find a lot in community building, and especially folks who might have an intention of having an intersectional, diverse community, is like, let's just immediately focus on the fact, either shared purpose for what we're creating together, which to me is an anchor, for what you're doing, some purpose, let's make our neighborhood more fun and friendly. Let's support each other in our work modes or things like that. But there's a really important deep process, I think, of listening and learning. And I'll say, just again, on behalf of my own identity, I think white women in particular, for some weird reason, tend to just want to immediately bypass that. And it is really harmful and destructive.
Yeah.
I want to add to that, just because there is, yes, listening, and every story is individual, but sometimes there are, like you said, common purposes. I had no trouble, Pamela, when I cold called women, and this was like 6 or 7 years ago. So this is before menopause was being talked about. Okay. This was before Naomi Watts, before Oprah Winfrey, before the menopause movement, before there was an ad on the Super Bowl for, HRT. This was tumbleweeds. It was the internet and the doctors, they were dry as women's vaginas when it came to information for us. And so when I would cold call these women and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. I really want to normalize aging. They immediately got it, no matter where they came from. But I have to tell you this, Pamela, I am having a dickens of a time getting multicultural representation on the site, despite the fact that I'm not really white. But it is interesting, and I don't know what that is. And that is an interesting thing. I'm having difficulty getting that cross-cultural perspective, which I think would be incredibly valuable.
One of my favorite questions is who's here, who's not here, and why aren't they here?
Yeah.
And we can never answer the last question.
Right.
It has to be, through conversation.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was interesting. I did some training in positive psychology, and one of the most profound kind of exercises that we did in the group, we were in person with about 180 of us, was a listening exercise. And we were put into dyad conversations, just with one person we didn't know. And the question was, how are you? How are you really? And the speaker had 3 minutes to speak, and the listener can only listen with kind eyes.
Yes.
They couldn't say me too. They couldn't interrupt. They couldn't provide a solution. They couldn't, just kind eyes. And it made you first of all, there were Kleenex was all around the room. It made you realize how rarely we're really listened to.
Yes.
What a gift that is. And the reality is, if we ask ourselves, are we really doing that? Are we really doing that consistently, especially with the people that we love? And I would argue we're probably not. I caught myself a lot. I think I'm a good listener, but you know what? I can be better. And I think it's so profound. And it's just 3 minutes. I mean, that 3 minutes was really was incredible. It was incredible. The other thing I wanted to add to the conversation is I went to a speaking engagement a couple weeks ago. My friend Allison Gilbert co-wrote a book with Dr. Ruth Westheimer. And you may have heard of this book. It's called Connections. It's actually The Joy of Connections. And she provides 100 ways that you can combat loneliness and create connection. So it was an incredible conversation. And of course, Dr. Westheimer passed away. So Allison was kind of channeling her in the conversation, was sharing the lessons that she learned from sitting down and spending so much time with this amazing woman. And one of the things that she said is that, 30% of adults are lonely, and you can be surrounded with people and be lonely. And so it's not about the number of people, it's about the depth. Yes. And you don't need to have depth with a lot of people. Yeah. And one of the kind of tips that she said, and I love this, she said, make your town small. Make your town small. So that's, in your community, like we have a little WhatsApp group in our community, in my neighborhood. It's been wonderful. I mean, everybody's chiming in, hey, do you need help? The power's out. It's that little connection piece that is really, really lovely. And so, she, of course, is from Germany, and she had a history of, through losing her family and Nazi concentration, like crazy. And she came to the United States, and she had to create her community. Obviously, she became very known for being a sex therapist, and then became the loneliness ambassador in New York City. And her whole thing was make your town small. Do those things, make it small. And she also, I wanted to share, I love this, she also collected turtles. She collected these little turtles, and there were hundreds of them around her apartment. And Allison said it was almost hard to find a place on the coffee table to put her drink because there were little turtles everywhere. And the reason why is she loved the symbology of a turtle. The turtle is safe in its shell, and then it sticks its neck out, and it has to stick its neck out to survive. And she loved that sticking your neck out is about taking risk. And that's what you need to do to create relationships, especially those that are deep.
Yeah.
Right?
I was actually just looking for the book because I know Allison too. I actually invited her to be on this panel.
Oh, you did? I was thinking after that I wish she was here. Yes.
Yeah, and it was the book is amazing, and hearing her speak about it was also amazing. And when I was doing research for this panel and for some client work that I was working on, I also found a lot of information about loneliness. And I sent it out this morning in an email that said, what you just said, Dana, that we can have people around us and still be lonely. And I would really like to kind of turn the conversation in that direction. And what has changed, or what have you learned from leading communities or being a leader within a community. And, how is it changing, not just you, but the people around you and the larger impact that it makes? I think that that's a really important part of this conversation, because loneliness is a factor, and it impacts our physical health, our mental health, our emotional well-being. And, I think the way that social media and communities online are changing is for the better, because it's not millions and millions of followers. It is these small little communities that, and how like, what I love seeing is, like, interconnection between them. Like, each one of us has a community, and, like, as these communities start to come together through us, I find that really exciting, because it's creating an energy that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to bring that up, Donna, and thank you, Dana, as well, for talking about loneliness, because what I've seen recently, not just in the world of fractional, but in brands and in general, there's a lot of people trying to build huge communities, and you can feel very lonely in big communities, when I think that the real value of a community is to create a series of rituals that allows people to share their experiences. That's really when you start building true relationship, which takes time, but it also takes a deeper type of engagement. So I think that would be one of the advice that I would give to anyone who wants to create a community, that you don't have to aim for 1,000 people. And we all know all this elevates and all those women's organizations that are needed and very important, but I don't think that they're bringing the relationship to a level of trust, because maybe they don't have these opportunities of rituals that provide shared experiences.
Yeah.
I want to jump into, there's so many wonderful things that have been said here. You had asked Virginie about, our value and purpose. And I think that was so important, because there's something that I say all the time. It's what I call the PPI. When I look at things, I want to look at things from the perspective of passion, purpose, and impact. And what are we passionate about? What is our purpose for doing what we're doing? Is it really to gain a zillion followers, or is it to gain that connection? And how are you doing that? Who are you marketing to? What is your message? So I look at all these things, and I want to go back to something too that was really important to me this last year. So this last year I was diagnosed in 2023 with neuroendocrine cancer. And I had a tumor in my lung, and I had been developing community for several years now on social media, both in person and on social media. And when I was diagnosed and they took out that tumor in November, in the background, what was going on was incredible, because I may not have a ton of followers, but the followers that I do have are closely connected, because the way that I want to show and show up is authentically.
Yeah.
I want to reach these people in an authentic way. I say to myself, if I'm not going to work for somebody else and I want to construct my own business, I'm going to do it with laughter. I'm going to do it with passion. I'm going to do it with purpose, and I'm going to do it with impact. So what was happening on the back end was all these people were getting together, and they created a book for me. This incredible book telling me with pictures and with content what I meant to them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Then
Yeah.
I love that. I love
Just gave me
that.
chills. I mean, that's amazing.
It was amazing. They raised incredible funds. I didn't need this, but they did it because they wanted to show me that, I was important to them. And I was like, oh my gosh, just that idea that a community that I had made online. And also many of those people came to my event last year, my event GritCon in San Diego, and flew from all over the country to be there. I was just like, whoo, now that speaks volumes about bringing community together, feeling connected, having passion, purpose, impact. And to me, that's what it's all about, is what's the passion? What is the passion?
Oh my gosh.
I love that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I love that, Summer, because something similar has happened to me, which I didn't anticipate, and I didn't create it so that I would get this. But there's this been tremendous halo effect for me personally, putting the roster of thought leaders together, because guess what? Those 65 women, I just wrote a book and it's in like 6 of their hands. They're editing it. They're just and then they call each other. They're on each other's podcast. They ask me, hey, do you know? And then just that community. And it's turned out that I have like 65 new BFFs all over the world. And I didn't know that was going to happen. That was not my intention. But boy, oh boy, if you're lacking friends, go make your own. Go put something together where you can just make your own pool of friends.
Yeah.
Oh, Summer, I'm so happy for you. And Jack, send me your book. I want to see it.
Oh, would you like to review
Yes.
I wrote a poem every day for 30 days. And so it's
freaking awesome.
Yep. And I've never written poetry before. So
very cool. Very cool. One thing I wanted to share
out of the turtle. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I want to share, Summer, too, is hats off to you for creating a community around your sickness, right? That's a very private thing, but you're making it public. Obviously, people didn't feel so alone. And it's interesting. I'm dealing with a chronic health condition, neuromuscular in nature. And I'm really wrestling with it. And it's been a very lonely journey because doctors don't understand. And I'm actually going to an event in New York City tonight. So after we log off in a half hour, I'll be taking the train afterwards to head into the city for an event called Chronicon. And it's bringing people together that have chronic illnesses and helping them understand. And it's interesting because health journeys can be so friggin' lonely. And I wish I had the foresight to have created a community around it. Maybe you'll inspire me to do that. But I'm really excited to be with other people tonight that are experiencing similar things and we can understand each other. So there's huge power in that.
Well,
I think for me too, that's what the intimacy part is that that way that we can connect over something that we're experiencing. And of course, it's all going to be very different the way we're experiencing it. But there's that thread. And I know my third child is adopted and we got him later in life and we struggled and we didn't understand why he was so upset all the time and having these outbursts and dysregulated. And finding a community or even support in the child services industry was really challenging. And I'm actually meeting with somebody next week about helping to form a community or a place where women and moms and dads can convert together and talk about these issues, and maybe even kids who have been adopted, what are they going through? And just to expand that, because I felt so lonely in my journey, and I know I wasn't alone, but there wasn't anything nearby. And that's what I think community is so valuable for, is that intimate support when someone gets and understands what you are dealing with, and you don't have to re-explain yourself or make excuses or talk about the emotions you're going on, because they get it. And there's something really beautiful about that to me. And I think when we can get together and share those stories, we understand that thread, but we can also have our own unique experience, especially when we listen well, right? So I love that piece around listening, especially. So
I think a lot about in the intimacy part, and especially through the lens of business, that I'm a language nerd. And so I find sometimes we interchangeably use let me build a community, which as a business owner, for example, which essentially is I want fans, followers, people to buy my stuff. And therefore I'm going to have a gathering of people, like I'm in business, I'm a coach. I love when people make money and all of that. But you can see where it starts to get very interesting. It is this intersection of values, purpose, and agency. And it's always the shadow side of community. And can we talk about the deep, painful, heart-wrenching sides of community as well, where there can be a way in which we can build community that's hey, when we're in this together for this particular time, or let's say I'll say the in community air quotes, right? You're in my business community because you're following my work and therefore we're all friendly. And then, by the way, maybe you choose to work with somebody else or go to another community, and all of a sudden you're out. It's kind of that mafia culture. That in business, I wrote about that in Escape from Cubicle Nation. Sometimes corporate culture is like, we're all family, and then you're laid off, and like nobody talked to that person because they're out. Inadvertently sometimes, right? We do that maybe around shared purpose or just, those hurt feelings where it can feel so painful. I know some of you talked about being sports, parents or aunties or things like that, where I remember doing martial arts. A student might go and like train with another teacher and you feel this like searing pain in your chest. But if you really are focused, I think in Virginie, what you're talking about really understanding and respecting the agency of individuals, you're not creating more of like this cult-like culture, where you're in and your family as long as you're doing what we say and we want, but you really want the well-being of that person, even if they go on the outside.
Absolutely.
Business owners, where we make that distinction, I tend to like not really use the language of community when I'm talking about really like business specific things, because sometimes we just mix it up so much. And I want people who do choose to work with me to know we're entering into a place now of maybe like service and commerce. And then that can be really different from the long-term, like real community relationships that we have. People who have worked with me that maybe leave and work with somebody else or all that. So I just think that part is so important, is we're really conscious. Like, what do we say? And we throw it around a lot, like, oh, you want more customers, build a community. I'm thinking like, that's not really a community.
Yeah.
No, and
I completely agree with you, Pamela, because I think, I completely agree with you, Pamela. There's a delay. That's why we're Go ahead, Jacqueline.
I just wanted to add that I agree with that, Pamela. And I have had this roster of thought leaders that have contributed to the platform now for over the past 5 years. And overall, there's been over 100, right? But there's not 100 right now because some women have gone. But you know what? Some women come back. And so that's the thing. For me, it's permeable. It's a permeable membrane. It is a community. If it's working, if it's a win-win, if you're in a place where it would help you to get that message out there and you need that audience and our audience benefits from it, please welcome. If you are in a position where that's not working for you right now, of course, but you're still stuck with me. And you know what I mean? And so I've had women that have gone and come and gone and come. And I get that. I get that that sort of distinction of are you building a community or are you building a pool of people that you can sell stuff to?
Yeah.
Completely agree with you, Jacqueline. I think a lot of organizations and CEOs like the idea of a community because it feels good. But very often they confuse community with marketplaces. And I think they forget that first and foremost, a community is a living organism. It's not small and it changed the way things are. And so if they're not willing to embrace discomfort and make the impossible possible, they'll, be faced to a wall and they'll be frustrated because it's not a marketplace. But if they're able to let go their ego and their, the idea of certainty, and they're really open to creating a space for other people to express themselves and feel that there's a trust, then a community or brand that has a community within their DNA, to me, is going to be the next generation of brands, because that's where you get the ultra customization, and that's where new business models will emerge. And if we look at how the new generation are craving for authenticity in their brands, in the brand that they choose, in the product that they choose to buy, I think a community makes perfect sense, but it's not easy to build one.
Yeah.
And I want to say here too is there's a distinction between building and developing. And building to me kind of represents like more of that business culture, that business dynamic. And what I've done over the years is develop. And part of developing that culture is bringing in folks with their insight, understanding who they are, doing that reflective listening. And that's something that I've done from the time I got out of undergrad to getting my master's and being in community and knowing I'm not going to go into a community and charge in there and say, I'm going to build this community and make a difference. And we're going to transition to A, B, or C. When I was trying to reduce recidivism with our youth in regards to gang violence or gang interactions or whatever the case. No, it was, let me go in there. Let me build trust. Let me develop trust. Let me do a needs assessment, see where their needs are, and figure out how we can work together to make these changes.
Yeah.
Because I had to listen. Otherwise, they're like, you're out. I don't want to work with this person. Right. And I was young going into that, going, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? And my mentors, which I want to mention here too, mentors for me have been such a big part of my life, and something that I do as a business owner now is a lot of mentorship, but teaching me how to develop communities, how to be authentic, how to listen, do that reflective listening. So, I want to go back to something that Jackson too about having these deep conversations, these hard conversations, these conversations about women and the things that we go through during our lives. And, it wasn't just Ruth. There was Barbara DeAngelis. There were other people that were trying to break into the field of talking about women's issues. And so we've been doing this for a long time, but I think we tend to, and again, I've seen this over the years, tend to go back to that conditioning. Yeah. Conditioning of building businesses, conditioning of strategy, being invited to the table. No, we make those tables. We make those tables and we listen and we learn. And that's something I do at Core Women with my podcast. At Core Women, which stands for how we as women, as humans, kinetically connect. As we move through the world, how are we connecting? What does that energy feel like, right? How are we organically learning from one another? How are we reshaping our lives through diverse interaction, and how are we empowering each other to promote change? The reason I mention this is because one of the things, as I was developing Core Women, I thought, I want to give back in some way. Part of my passion and my impact is to give back, and that's to create a podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting. And I was like, I was scared. I'm not the kind of person who wants to ever do a TEDx. I don't want to be on a stage. I just like these fireside chats. I love these things, right? What I wanted to do is build a space where I could have those fireside chats with other women so that they could share, their passions, their purpose, the impact. And one woman said to me, well, I don't understand why we can't talk about my business first. I said, because I really want people to know you personally first.
Yeah.
I want them to get connected with you. I want them to feel that connection, that authenticity, and understand who you are. And she tapped back into that like a year or two later. And she said, you were the first person to make me stop and think, well, how am I connecting with community?
Yeah.
What does that feel like? What does that look like? And I said, let's then we can jump into what you do professionally, because honestly, people will want to know more about that once they get to know you.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was
you did her a favor, Summer. I mean, did she come back later and share that with you, that she was like, wow, that's definitely a value add change in behavior? Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is she totally did. And the one other thing I want to mention too is when I mentioned to my community that I had cancer, it wasn't around cancer. It was my community, that development of that community was such that we talked about everything, different things. And so when I had that come up, it wasn't solely about, oh, Summer's got cancer and we've got this in common. It's Summer's got cancer. Let's jump in because we know her, we love her, we want to support her. And to me, that felt good. That was where, like, I don't tear up easily, but when I did, I was just like, oh my gosh, you guys are bringing me to tears. This is amazing, right? So
yeah, that means you created real relationships, right? It wasn't just this thing that lived there, kind of, sorta. Like you had real relationships that you
got it.
Yeah. But Donna, I think back to your question about how do you lead within a community. It's you're bringing up all those points, Summer, and all of you have kind of touched on this, but we ourselves have to be great listeners, probably quite vulnerable at times, not just bringing up cancer randomly, but you've also brought up other or talked about other things that matter to you, that are important to you, that are your passions and purpose. And when we share that to me, I found as one of the biggest trust builders, if you will, is to model what we would like to see from the people in our community. So, we want to create a safe space for that as well, because obviously we want everyone, when they are heard and when they are able to share their voice, that they feel safe in doing that. But I think we can model that as leaders of a community. And so vulnerability, being honest ourselves, being authentic, that takes practice on its own, so we can show it how it's done and how beneficial it can be.
It's funny, as we're talking about community, what's popping up for me is we all have multiple communities, and communities are big and communities are small, right?
Yeah.
A community can be your closest friends.
Yeah.
2 people, or your family. A community can be, I kind of look at, like in my life, there's a community of closest peeps, right? And then there's the people that I just so enjoy getting to know, meeting, maybe even kind of on a very enjoyable but not super deep level. The people that you just really enjoy seeing. Like, it's lovely going and getting my iced tea every day and knowing the barista. That's part of my community, right? Yeah. That still, I think, elevates your life. Then there's the community, of course, with business. They're the people that we served with Camp Reinvention, but we're part of the menopause community. I mean, who would have ever thought that became a thing? And now it's awesome that we've met all these people in that community, and there's relationships. I mean, that's, Jack, how I met you, right? So there's real relationships that build in those communities. I'm personally looking for a community of other like-minded entrepreneurs. So if you guys want to connect, but I really want to have a little bit more of that kind of support in my life, and to help other women, because I often find that the women that are my closest friends aren't entrepreneurs, and I kind of just stay away from business talk with them.
Yeah.
And it's really lonely, isn't it, Dana?
Different pockets and different needs, and you have communities for each one of those, and it can be big or small. Yeah.
I agree, especially about the entrepreneurship. Although I do have some friends who are entrepreneurs, but we don't talk about business. We just don't. That is not how the relationship was defined 30 some odd years ago, and it's not going to change tomorrow. But I also would love a community of women who are in the trenches, similar trenches that I find myself in every day, because it's an echo chamber in here, right? And it can get very lonely and a little scary at times. So yeah.
So anybody who wants to connect with community business-wise.
You and I are connected, but I mean, exactly. If you wanted to be a little more formal, right? A little more.
Right. I think so, because again, like there's different needs that we have, and we need to, I think, kind of create that community around each of those things. So that's what I'm personally craving right now.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book some time ago. I don't want to offend anybody, but so when I started my business, I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So I wrote a book, and the short title is F Yeah, Get Real with Strong Language. And it's about your beliefs and values. And I took the idea of strong language, and I didn't want to objectify it, but I wanted to take it because it is a sensitive subject. We were taught certain things about it, how to use it, how not to use it, what to say, when not to say certain things, if you're going to use it. So there were all these ideas.
Talking about swear words.
Yeah. But that again.
Are you talking about the F-bomb that's like words ever?
I am. And so I didn't objectify it that way. I said strong language. And yet that's exactly it, Jack, is I took people through a process of identifying their beliefs and values. Because some people also say, well, I don't believe in that, but use it behind closed doors. Or, they aren't authentic about it. And I'm like, well, if you're going to use it, then use it, but understand why you're going to use it
in the real world. If you're going to use it.
Yeah, the kids nowadays use the F-bomb like a punctuation mark. Right?
Yes.
It doesn't belong in every sentence, right?
And that's right. It can be a noun, a verb, an exclamation, and that's something we go through. It can also be used for reasons to reduce pain. It can be used as an outlet. I mean, but I also go through it as language. Any kind of language can be used to be hurtful. right? And so it was really an idea of, let me take you and walk you through using this means, using this subject to really understand your beliefs and values. The reason I did it is because I really think that we've been conditioned to believe many things, whether or not, and this is getting to a point, whether or not it's from our family members, our parents, our clergy, our educators, or whatever. And I went to Catholic school. I did a lot. I was in the military. I was part of these microcultures that we had to use certain language or do certain things. And finally, I was like, you know what? Take a step aside, take a step out, Summer. And what do you really believe in? What are your beliefs and values? And the reason I say this is because as we develop as people, as we develop as business owners, it's so important to understand what those are, because that's going to be those commonalities. That's what's going to help bring those people together. That's what's going to help bring that authenticity to whatever group you're going to develop, whatever it is that you're marketing, that you're out there, because guess what? All that is going to infuse not just in your personal life, but into your business as well.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're going to be talking about as a business owner too.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes left. I can't believe an hour has gone by already.
That
What a great
flew.
conversation.
I wish my workout hour flew this fast.
So I like to wrap up these conversations with a wisdom bomb or a piece of wisdom that you've gained from being in or a leader of a community. So I'm just going to kind of go around the room and ask everybody to share something. Pam, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I think one big lesson I've learned is support first, then build. Especially when we maybe coming into a new environment or you have purpose. I know working downtown, there already are all kinds of people who have been building community. And sometimes we talk about, I want to build community. Community is always already there. So when you really recognize who is already there, it's a wonderful way to begin to get connected, is go to other people's events. If you're a business owner, sponsor other people's events. And then you can see where is the gap. And sometimes you don't need to be building your own community. If they're already, you can just be supporting somebody else's. So support first, then build.
I love
It's necessary.
I love that. I'm just going to kind of go around how I see your faces. Jack?
Well, for me, I have to say information is power, and that includes in communities as well. And in being transparent, and that's sort of what I mean about information. And in my community, in the Kuel Life community, well, it's double tiered, right? It's the roster, and we are a very intimate community. And I believe in that side, in that community, that the advice that I would give is what you just said. I want to add, also support. There's so much support between the women in that roster. They are there for each other in podcasts. They are there for each other to proofread. They are there for each other to go live. And that community didn't exist before Kuel Life, but it wasn't the community that I intentionally tried to build. It was just the halo effect that's turned out to be the most interesting part of Kuel Life for me. So you just never know where it's going to show up, where the interesting part's going to show up.
Kim?
I guess my wisdom bomb is that I have found that when I am lonely, one way that I deeply connect is to ask someone a question about their life, something very specific, like what happened to you as a child, when were you most happy or proud, or whatever it might be, and then to really listen. It connects me so deeply and gives me permission to really see them as they are. So I'll just leave you with that as something to maybe try out with one of your relationships.
Love it. Okay, Dana?
Mine's on a more personal note. I've made a practice for several years now to every week ask myself who matters to me that I haven't spoken to in a long time. And I pick up the damn phone and I call them. And I think nothing beats having a conversation and really getting or meeting with them, right? Like, I think we're all so busy. And I think oftentimes we confuse having a big kind of pool of connections with that real connection, with really knowing what's happening in somebody's life. So my thought is make the effort, put your neck out, and make one phone call a week to somebody who matters to you.
Be a turtle.
Yeah, be a turtle.
Virginie?
First of all, thank you so much, Dana, for inviting me to this conversation. It was really interesting. I took a bunch of notes. So, and thank you, everyone, for sharing and being honest and open about their experience. So, a couple of things for me resonates. First of all, I'm building my community very intentionally with 3 principles, and I think some of you have said something to that matter. Curiosity towards others as a path of connection. Honesty, deeply, being deeply honest to myself, hiding nothing, and then using my own truth in my intention, words, and action. And then courage to be vulnerable, courage to stand up and stand out. And then the second thing is, as I work with organizations and help them build communities, I always try to remind them that a community is bigger than their product. And so they will have to let go of the ego and certainty to make room for others and create a safe space to build deep relationships. And only then will opportunity arise. So that's my 2 leave behind.
And that's good stuff. And Summer?
Well, my wisdom bomb would be to ask yourself, what do you fear that has blocked you from getting in, or has gotten in the way of you doing something you're really passionate about? And sometimes we just have to lean into that fear. It's like throwing that pebble in the water where you get those concentric circles, because when you lean into that fear, you can throw that pebble in the water and create something bigger than ourselves. And reflect on what it is today that you really want to do, and maybe how you can get out of the way of yourself from doing it, because maybe it's fear that's promoting that block somehow. So, but that's it. That's my wisdom bomb. Thank you for inviting me today.
Oh, thank you all for being here. Pam
Thank
had
you.
to jump off, but
Thank you so
I
much.
just want to thank everybody for coming and sharing your stories and your experiences and your wisdom. This has been incredible. I feel like I was a very lucky fly on the wall.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna.
Meeting all of you. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
And please, if you're listening on the replay, post comments in the streams, and we will come back, tag us, we'll come back, and we'll keep the conversation going. This is up on many of our streams, so please share with others. I think that this is an important conversation for a lot of people to share, to learn more, and to kind of be in the conversation about community. And one of the things that I had mentioned earlier was that I really I'm liking the way that things are getting smaller online, and people are connecting on things that matter to them and things that they care about. And I think when we do that, we can connect on a deeper level, and we can make a bigger impact, and we can actually affect change. And we kind of go below that noise or above that noise that's just happening all over, and we could really make a difference. And that's what gets me excited. And being able to connect you all. I mean, the fact that, like, when it didn't hit me until you all started coming on this morning, that you don't really know each other, and like, what's going to happen from this. So if anything does, please come back and share, because for me, that is the greatest joy of this entire project that I somehow created.
Well, thank you, Donna. It's a fabulous project, and I'm thrilled that I now have all of these new women in my life. I mean, Dana, I already knew her, but whatever.
Yeah, and just such a pleasure meeting all of you. So this has really been a treat.
Okay, well, everybody have a great rest of your day, and we are here live every Wednesday and once a month with a new panel. I've already got topics for most of 2025, so we're just going to keep going. Thanks, and thank you.